All right. So, welcome everybody. This is a quick video, a time lapse of me sort of exploring and creating a character for my nephew's new game. So, this is my other nephew, Matt. This is Matt and Jake. You already can see Jake's great game, the first one I made for him, up on my site. And this one is for my other nephew, Matthew. He came up with this idea called The Did and the Van, or The Dids and the Vans. Not really sure where the name came from, but I think it's fun, so let's just stick with it. And he created a whole little game idea, which is actually quite awesome sounding, and I really want to make it. And I'll be making it here on the streams and putting up on my video tutorials as I go. But he gave me a pretty hard to understand little character initially. It's basically just a ball with a bunch of like 5 spikes coming off of it. I'm like, all right, cool. Let's turn this into a character. So what you saw before when we first started was just my initial sketch of the character, trying to determine, what it should look like, and came up with something that I was thinking, okay, how do I make his head as long as his feet and hands? So I was like, well, let's just put a top hat on him, like a super tall, skinny top hat. So that's what I did. And my nephew, who is 8, loved it. So I'm just going to stick with that. And exploring some googly eyes. I just watched that Gardner SNL video with voice just slipped my mind right now. That's too bad. Anyway, he puts googly eyes on all of his plants. Christopher Walken. It's amazing. Puts googly eyes on all of his plants because he doesn't trust them. And if there's googly eyes on them, he can see their eyes. He can see where they're looking. Anyway, so up in the top left corner there, you can see that is the sketch. That is the concept character that my nephew gave me. So I was like, all right, we can turn this into something. So here I'm drawing just his different weapons, and he's got 3. There's bow and arrow, gun, and a sword and shield. And these are the different characters you can like put onto the battlefield and have them run around. And there's like 2 castles, and they fight off against each other, and you can build defenses to protect your castle. So it sounds kind of like that Clash of Clans and all that other stuff, but it's going to be a totally different kind of game. More action-based, more local. I don't know how to build any of that madness, networking, insane amounts of people. I don't know how to do that stuff. That's way outside of my league. But what is within my league is making something super simple that that we all can enjoy sort of locally, and just with maybe 1 or 2 friends, something like that, or just really the idea. Primarily my game development has been sort of limited to building prototypes of things, getting the concept from paper to something that works. So paper to palm is what I like to say. It's not necessarily a final full-fledged out game because that takes a lot of time. And I like to do things a little quicker and get things done and move on to the next thing as fast as possible. So here I'm drawing in a bow and arrow, well, archery, but he's got these they're like spears. They're like grappling hook styled arrows. So that's pretty fun. And I just put those all into groups and the layers. And this is going to make it really easy to swap out the different weapons later because they're all drawn for this character. And now I'm going to go ahead and start doing some color. So for color, the way I like to work is create a new layer underneath my sketch and just sort of fill everything in with a solid, any color. It could be white, black, whatever. I like to choose something that's somewhat reminiscent of what I'm going to be doing in the end, but it doesn't really matter. And you see, if I turn off the line work, then the color edges that I just painted in behind the line work are really sloppy and jagged and kind of messed up. So what I ended up doing is selecting all the interior components of my line work and then inverting the selection and erasing away any of my color that would have existed underneath the line work. So now my line work and my color like line up exactly. There's no overlapping underneath my line work. And that's just going to make it easier if at one point I decide that I don't want to do a line work character, but I want to just be existing without the line work. It makes it really easy. I can just turn that line work off, and I've already got clean, nice edges for all of my my base paints. So again, now that I've got that base layer down of his whole body, I'm just creating layers on top of it and calling it like pants or hat, and then coloring in and using my base layer as a clipping mask. So I don't have to worry about going outside of the edges anymore, or outside the lines, and I can be really quick and sloppy with all my colors. And this actually is really useful also because if I sort of match all my colors together, so one layer is all my blue things, and another layer is all my purple things, and another layer is all my green things, I can really easily just grab that layer and hit a hue saturation, like Control U, and change that color super easily without affecting anything else. So this has been the way that I like to work when I'm doing sketches like this that are more cartoony in nature, just because it provides so much flexibility later down the road. And so here I'm just sort of like throwing some shadows. So I put them on the same, I typically put the shadows in the same layer as my base color, but it also really makes a lot of sense to put them on a new layer, clipping to your base color, and then set it to multiply. And this is another thing that I do often is if I set it to multiply, then and choose like a white color, like, or rather just a color with no color in it, so some sort of a gray value, and usually a pretty light gray value. Then I'll just drop down that color, and it's going to mix and merge with whatever my base color is, and that's going to look great. And then I can just change my base color, and I don't have to worry about changing my shadow colors or anything like that as well. But for this character, I wanted to make it a little simpler, so so I just put it all in the same layer. So where my color is, I've also drawn in my shadow by just taking a darker version of my shadow or my base color. And that's what I have over there on the left, is that sort of palette that I just sort of put together real fast. Now wood that I'm going to do on the shield, wood's kind of fun. I just draw in a few different variations of that base color and then start with like kind of a light opacity, and then start sampling from what I've put down. So I'd sample like a new brown from the mix of my brown and red, and then sample a new brown from the mix of that brown and the other red that exists, and just keep on sampling and drawing and sampling and drawing, and then pretty quickly you get something that kind of feels wood. Now that doesn't feel that wood right now because I haven't gone through the final stage of adding in a little detail, but it at least gets the idea across, and I'll go in there and fix that later. A lot of this was just sort of, okay, let's just get the idea in there. Let's just put it down and move on. So much of what I like to do and the way I like to work is just, let's just get something in there and then we'll revisit it later. But the further along you can get with just something, the faster your workflow is going to go and the easier life is going to be in the long run. Just so that you're not always like, oh, there's so much to do. There's this giant mountain of things that I have to do. It's like, no, I just, everything's there. I just need to refine it. So that's why I like to work. So again, for the gun, just filling in the full shape, the full color, which is, and then going in and putting layers on top to edit and adjust the color using the full color, the base layer, as a clipping mask. And you can do the clipping mask by just holding down Alt and going between the two layers, like your new layer and your base layer, and the icon will change, and then you click and you get that little arrow and it's pointing down. It's saying I will be clipping based on all this stuff. So I realized that I wanted to have his hand closed instead of open, so you can be gripping that arrow. So I just redrew that and cut away from the base layer, and then just added new shadows, and that was easy. So same kind of thing for this, just throw in a base color for all of the bow and arrow that I can use as sort of an alpha mask. And so that's what I've done. Now I'm throwing in highlights using that alpha mask of the color I just added. And I guess I went for kind of a bronze, gold, something or other for all this stuff. Not really sure why, but there's no reason why not to. So that's what I got going on there. And then I'm just going to mask away his hand, the bow and arrow from his hand, so that I still have the whole bow and arrow drawn out, but it just it integrates with his hand a little better. So now it's cleaning that up so that it works for the fist instead of the open hand. And let's save that out. We've got our weapons, we've got our dude, and let's start creating an environment for him. So here, I'm just going to create something kind of quick. This environment isn't going to be used in the game at all. This is just a way for me to sort of get a visual reference and a guide of what his environment should look like. And also, so I can show my nephew and be like, hey man, is this what you were thinking? And he can tell me yes or no. For the most part, they're pretty accepting of most of the stuff I show them. Like when I showed him this concept, he really loved it. He was like, oh, it's great. I love the hat and all that, and the gun's cool. And I'm like, all right, cool. Mind you, they're 8. He's 8. So I think he's going to be pretty excited about anything right now. But I do appreciate that he does enjoy the sort of the places that I take the games that he makes. They both make. But anyway, this is just a sort of a way of exploring and experimenting with what the background will look like in the end. But it's going to be more of a top-down view, sort of a top three-quarter, think StarCraft, RTS, MOBA kind of viewport or viewpoint. And same thing. This is all done with just the regular old Photoshop soft round brush, the simple basic brush. I like to have pressure sensitivity on for the size, but I don't like to have the size go all the way down to like the pinpoint size. So I limit my minimum size to about 50% of my existing size, just as a little line variation, but I don't get these like super tiny micro lines anywhere, because micro lines are annoying. I don't like them. They always get lost in there. So then I'm just throwing in a little tree cover in the background there, and some fallen logs and some more rocks and these little mounds, little cliff side mound things. I'm not really sure what they are, but they're in there, and they're going to be dirt and brown and all that fun stuff. So when you're drawing scenery like this, it helps that there are rocks that are being like half cut off by grass. It just makes things look, a little bit more contained, like they've been sitting there for a long time. So I draw like a half dome, and then the bottom half, underneath it, I just draw like a squiggly line that sort of denotes grass. And really, like the main thing is there's grass everywhere, right? So everything should eventually just like intersect with grass. So you can draw whatever shape you want, and then just at the bottom do a squiggly line, and you're pretty much in business. So same kind of thing here, for just like what I did with the body. I'm drawing in just a base color, and this is going to allow me to separate out the trees from the background trees and from the mountains and all that fun stuff. So it doesn't matter what color it is. I chose green just because it visually makes a little more sense to me. And this is going to become like my base color. So everything, shadows, highlights, all that stuff is going to fall back onto this sort of green. And now that I got all that in place, now I can really easily go in and, I'm just cleaning up, create a new layer in the back and put it behind, and be really sloppy with everything below my foreground objects, because that stuff isn't ever going to show up. So cleaning up a little bit more, just kind of getting rid of all that stuff that's outside of my scope. And let's throw in some mountains, and again just sort of erasing away and cleaning this up too. Real helpful. Excuse me. And sky. And now I can easily edit the colors of all those, really simply. So here I've switched over to my Mac, and I am actually filming this from the woods. So I figured I was drawing the woods, drawing the mountains. Why not go to the woods and experience it firsthand? It was also raining that morning and beautiful, and I just wanted to be connected to nature while drawing this stuff. So went out there and started going to town. So for rocks and stuff, I'm just sort of dropping them in there, and put a new layer up, and then paint everything kind of bright blue. Again, I can edit this color at any time. So I just want to get something in there so that I have all the rocks grouped up and separated. I mean, I could be painting this with bright red or black or white or any other color, but I'm kind of choosing the colors that I eventually want in the end. Sort of. And so I'm doing the same thing with the trees. Basically, I'm kind of creating masks for myself so that each group of objects is separate, and then I can easily paint in shadows and highlights and all that stuff. Let Photoshop do a lot of the work for me. Just getting some tree barks in. It's always useful. And I'm going to try to be conscious of the light direction here. Not yet, but eventually. I'm kind of exploring what I want that bush color to be. And then I decided, well, it doesn't really matter. I'll just put something in. We'll get back to it. But eventually I'm going to be conscious of the light direction when I start putting in shadows and highlights, because it has to match whatever my light direction on my character is. Again, like I said, this isn't an asset that's going to be used in the final game. This is more just, I just wanted to explore and experiment with what these colors could look like. So here we go. All is looking good. I drop this giant grass color back in, and I'm like, okay, well, I've got these shapes, which are kind of fun. What if I just sort of mess with the top halves of them? Can I get something that I like? And I thought overall the grass was too bright, and I wasn't really digging it. I kind of messed with it a little bit more, but I ended up tossing it entirely. So here I'm like, okay, well, what happens if I just take a different brush, which is just the chalky brush with my transparency or my flow and opacity mapped into pen pressure. And if I just sort of, gave it a more painterly look for all this environment stuff. I knew I was going down a path that wasn't necessarily going to help me, because my character is very cartoony stylized. His highlight and shadow colors are very, very hard and very delineated. So this sort of soft, feathery, painterly looking look for the environment is going to be very incongruous. So I did end up just deciding to toss this all, but at least we can take a look at another way of painting stuff. And so it's like a little muddy road that he's standing next to. And I'm like, all right, well, I don't know if this is really working. I wasn't really digging it. So I tried a few more things, tried to throw some highlights in. Like, maybe if I can make this dirt road work, then I can make the grass work, and we'll figure it out. But I just wasn't making that dirt road work to something that I liked. So just got rid of all of it. I was like, okay, let's go back to this more simple, large shapes and shadows. Everything's kind of chopped up and just more consistent with the character itself. And now I'm going in with a second pass, throwing in occlusion shadows, just like the shadows where the ground contacts the object. Light isn't going to be able to get through there at all, so things get really, really dark around those bases. And again, I'm like, well, maybe I can still work with this weird sort of patched ground that I made here. And nah, I'm not going to work with that. It sucks. So here we are back on the PC, and yeah, just sort of going back in for another pass. I'll be finishing up this sketch today, but I wanted to at least get you guys up to speed with what I've got so far. So again, this is for my nephew's game. It's called The Did in the Van. What you're looking at right here is one of the dids and it is a roach, sort of stick bug kind of character. I'll also be putting up today a video of me animating this guy. So I just brought him into Unity and started animating him. So thanks for watching, and we'll be back later.